If you toast the salt the wrong way, you don't open wealth, you close the path. And almost no one notices, because the problem isn't just a lack of money. The real problem is when money doesn't stay. You do everything right, and it still slips away. Bills, unexpected expenses, debt that comes back, people who delay your life. And here's the detail that changes everything. It's not the strength of the heat. It's your rush. Rush is the language of scarcity. And scarcity disrupts the ritual. Who taught me this was a rabbi, not in a synagogue, not in a book. It was in a simple kitchen, a pan on the stove and a handful of salt in his hand. He said, "Wealth enters where there is order. Where there is leakage, you seal first." In a moment, I'll show you the step-by-step, and especially the mistake that cancels everything. If you avoid just this one mistake, you already change the energy of the space. And pay attention. In the next 72 hours, many people notice 3 small signs: more clarity, people revealing who they really are, and an opportunity that comes back out of nowhere. This is not a miracle. It's order. If this video showed up for you right now, it might not be a coincidence. Sometimes the message arrives when you've already done your part, and all that's left is opening the right door. This channel is new, so subscribe now so you don't miss what comes next. Because I'm going to teach you how to protect what arrives, so wealth doesn't slip away again. And make a micro-commitment. Comment here, with respect, just this: today, I open wealth with order. I read the comments, and that anchors you to the process. Now stay with me, because the mistake is in the details. You don't need to believe in miracles for this to work in your life. What I'm teaching here is a symbolic practice, inspired by tradition and values like order, intention, and discipline, and most of all, a way to regain a sense of control when it feels like money comes in, but never stays. Today, you're going to leave this video with 3 things very clear. First, how to identify whether your issue is a lack of effort or a leak. That feeling that no matter what you do, something always shows up to take it away. Second, how to use toasted salt as a seal of order, with intention and calm, because the power isn't in the ingredient, it's in the way you do it. Third, how to close the process properly, so you don't keep opening things and leaving them unfinished, because that's where many people reverse what had just started to improve. And I'm going to warn you gently and directly. Most people get step 2 wrong, for a reason that seems small, but changes everything. That small reason is what I call the mistake, not to scare you, to protect you. Now let me ask you a quick question. Answer honestly, inside yourself. When you think about money, do you feel peace or do you feel urgency? Because usually, after 50, especially for those of us who carry a lot for our families, the mind goes into alert mode. Bills, medication, groceries, the house, one unexpected thing after another. And without realizing it, we get tired. And that tiredness has a cost. It turns into rush. Rush becomes a way of living. And then you start doing everything on autopilot, including what should be a moment of order. I want you to imagine something simple. A house with small cracks. They don't have to be big, just small cracks. What happens to water? It doesn't stay. It finds a way out. With financial support, with provision, something similar happens. And when I say provision, I'm not talking only about money. I'm talking about stability, peace of mind, opportunities, doors opening with less resistance. Sometimes the problem isn't, I don't work hard enough. Sometimes it's this, I can't sustain what comes in. It comes, and it goes. It comes, and it goes. And inside, that wears you down. Now I'm going to touch a sensitive point, with respect. There are women who are tired of being strong, tired of holding everything together, tired of feeling that just when things seem like they'll improve, something pulls them back. And that's not weakness, that's carrying too much weight. That's why I say this clearly. Before trying to attract wealth, we first need to close the leaks. Because what doesn't stay mowed doesn't build. And now here's the simple 10-second test I promised you. No mysticism. It's psychological. It's human. Think about money right now, just for 2 seconds, and notice your body. Does your chest tighten? Does your stomach clench? Does your breathing get shallow? Do you feel a sense of urgency, like you're behind? If the answer is yes, that's already a sign. You're living your finances in survival mode. And survival creates rush. And rush creates small decisions that open leaks. And I note, sometimes the leak isn't just bills. Sometimes the leak is emotional. People who drain you, conversations that knock you down, comparison, guilt, fear of being judged, fear of things finally working and someone resenting it. But notice this. I'm not saying it's anyone's fault. I'm saying there's a life space, your home, your mind, your daily rhythm, that needs order in order to sustain improvement. And that's where salt comes in as a symbol. Across human history and tradition, salt has been used as a sign of preservation. Covenant, protection, a seal. But here's the difference. Raw salt, thrown in carelessly, becomes just another anxious gesture. And an anxious gesture seals nothing. It only scatters. That's why the core of what you're going to learn here is this: order before asking, calm before intention, presence before rush. Now I want to pause for real and ask you something simple. Comment below just one word, so I know who's truly here with me. If you feel like money doesn't stay, comment leak. If you feel like it's just a hard season that will pass, comment season. That's it. No long explanations. One word. And while you comment, let me tell you why this matters. When you write it down, you're not writing for me. You're registering it for yourself. I see what's happening, and the moment you see it, you stop blaming yourself so much. When guilt eases, the mind slows down, and when the mind slows down, the path starts to open. In a moment, I'll clearly show you step 1 and step 2, and I'll repeat what needs to be repeated, because this audience deserves to be guided with calm, not pressure. Stay with me until step 2, because that's where the invisible detail lives. That's where most people do what everyone does and don't understand why nothing changes. And I don't want you to be just another one trying. I want you to do this with order. Take a breath. And let's go into the story that explains this in a way you'll never forget. Let me tell you a story that sounds simple, but once you understand it, you'll never look at money slipping away the same way again. I'll call this woman Lucia. Lucia is 56 years old. She's the kind of woman everyone calls strong. She takes care of the house, solves problems, holds the family together the best she can, and even when no one sees it, she tries to keep her head up. But there was one week, one of those weeks that feels like a test, when she felt she had reached her limit. She laid the bills out on the table, she did the math, redid the math, added it up again. And what hurt the most wasn't the number, it was the feeling. You know that thought, I'm not asking for luxury, I just want to breathe. Lucia worked. She had her routine. She did what she could. But the money never settled. It came in and went out. Came in and went out. Always an unexpected expense. Always a bill she didn't plan. Always an urgency. And along with that came a quiet shame. Not shame for being in debt, but shame for feeling that no matter how hard she tried, nothing ever stabilized. And there's something many women over 50 understand without anyone explaining it. When you carry too much, you start losing patience with yourself. Lucia became harder, more rushed, and that's natural. When life tightens, we speed up. But that's where the problem starts, because she began handling everything in rush mode, rushing to pay, rushing to reply, rushing to chase solutions, even rushing to rest. And when rest is rushed, it doesn't restore. One night, late, she sat on her bed and felt an emptiness that wasn't just about money. It was a lack of direction, a kind of exhaustion that makes you want to disappear for a few hours just to stop hearing your own thoughts. And it was that night she remembered something a neighbor had said months earlier. There's a man who guides people. He doesn't promise miracles, but he talks about order. And when you leave there, you feel lighter. Lucia didn't go out of curiosity. She went because she couldn't stand feeling stuck anymore. The next day she went. She arrived with that posture of someone who doesn't want to be a burden, but also doesn't want to go back home the same way. She spoke little. She talked about being tired. She said she worked, but the money never stayed. She talked about the bills. She said it felt like there was an invisible hand pulling everything downward. And the rabbi, an older man, calm eyes, listened in silence. You know when someone listens to you without rushing you, and that alone already feels like a blessing? He didn't ask how much she made. He didn't ask what her job was. He didn't ask about numbers. He asked one question that made Lucia uncomfortable. He said, "In your home, do you feel it's protected or just locked?" Lucia froze, because she had never thought about it that way. She answered what seemed obvious. "My house is locked. I lock everything." And he looked at her firmly but without harshness and said, Locked is not the same as protected. Lucia took a deep breath. She didn't understand. So he continued. When provision doesn't stay, there's often a leak. And the leak isn't always in the wallet. Sometimes it's in the way a person lives, in the way they speak, in the way they rush, in the way they carry everything alone. Then he said a sentence that sounds simple but hits like a hammer when you're tired. Rush is the language of scarcity. Lucia felt it immediately. Because she was living rushed. Even when she didn't need to be, she was. Her mind never stopped. And he explained calmly, salt is a symbol of sealing and preservation, but a seal isn't made in a rush. A seal is made with presence. If you do any gesture trying to prove something, you scatter. If you do it with order, you seal. Lucia asked, so I'm doing it wrong? And he answered, you're not wrong, you're tired. And tiredness creates rush, and rush opens leaks. First we close, then we call things in. And here is the most important point of this story. Lucia didn't leave thinking, now I'm going to get rich. She left thinking, I need to return to order. I need to stop punishing myself. I need to do one thing at a time with presence, because when the mind slows down, you start seeing opportunities you couldn't see before. You start making decisions with more clarity, and money starts to stop leaking through small cracks. Now stay with me, because from here on I'm going to show you exactly what that rabbi taught, but the right way, simple, layered, step by step. And most importantly, I'm going to show you step 2, where almost everyone fails because of rush, and without realizing it, cancels what was just beginning to open. Let's go to the core rule: order, seal, and closure. Hold on to this, because this rule organizes everything that comes next. And when you understand this rule, you stop chasing miracles and start creating consistency. The rule is simple: order, seal, and closure. First, order. Order is not perfection. Order is leaving rush mode and entering presence mode, because when the mind is in rush mode, any practice turns into disguised anxiety, and anxiety, instead of opening, scatters. So before anything else, order means asking yourself, am I doing this to prove something, or am I doing this to align myself? If it's to prove something, it already starts weak. If it's to align, it already starts strong. Second, the seal. The seal is the gesture done the right way, with intention and calm. The toasted salt here is a symbol of that. It's not magic salt, it's what it represents: preservation, protection, boundaries, firmness. The seal is when you say to yourself, I'm no longer going to live leaking energy, time, and money through small cracks. And here comes a delicate point. The seal is also about words. Because many women, out of exhaustion, get used to saying phrases that sound normal, but inside they turn into a decree. Things like, I never have enough, money never lasts, everything goes wrong for me, there's always a problem. I'm not going to ask you to stay positive, and I'm going to ask you to be precise. Instead of, I never have enough, say, I'm reorganizing. Instead of, money never lasts, say, I'm learning how to sustain what comes in. That is a seal. It's a boundary placed through words. Third, closure. Closure is what almost no one does. People open a practice, open hope, open movement, and then leave everything open. And leaving things open creates confusion. Closure is a simple gesture that says, it's complete, it's sealed, I trust the process. And closure is what prevents the back and forth effect. It's what prevents reversal. Now pay attention. When you apply order, seal, and closure, you change 3 things without even noticing. You change your rhythm, you change your small decisions, and you change the kind of energy you allow close to you. And over time, that changes the result. And I want to ask you something directly, because this channel is new, and I don't want you to watch one video and disappear. This is a sequence, built in layers. One lesson helps. A sequence transforms. So subscribe now and stay with me for the next chapters, because in the next video I'm going to show you how to protect what comes in, so wealth doesn't slip away again through the same old places. Now let's go into the step by step, but I'm going to do it the right way. Short chapters with calm and with the mistake showing up exactly where it usually happens. I'm going to guide you through the steps now. And before we begin, I want you to understand something clearly. This is not about doing it fast. It's about doing it with order. Remember the phrase, rush is the language of scarcity. So the first goal is for you not to fall into rush mode. I'll break this into short chapters so you don't get lost. You can take notes if you want, but if you don't, that's okay. What matters most is the state you're in while doing it. Chapter 1. Preparation. What happens before the salt? Before touching the salt, do something simple. Wash your hands with running water. No drama, just wash and breathe. And while you're washing, think this: I'm leaving rush outside. Because in practice, this gesture marks a shift. You move out of autopilot and into awareness. Now take 3 slow breaths, not to force calm, just to come back into your body. And here's a detail many people ignore. For 1 minute, avoid talking to anyone, avoid your phone, avoid distractions. This doesn't need to become a ceremony. It's simply about not breaking presence, because presence is the beginning of the seal. Now I'll tell you what you need. Simply, no excess, no complication. You'll need a handful of salt, preferably coarse salt or regular table salt, whatever you have, a clean pan or skillet, a wooden spoon if you have one. If not, use a regular spoon, gently. The point here is no aggressive scraping, no banging, no doing this with anger. And clean water for the final part of the process. That's it. This alone already works as a symbolic practice of order and intention. Some traditions also use aromas and spices, cinnamon, cloves, bay leaves, as symbols of movement, grounding, and victory. You can use them if you already have them at home and if they bring you peace. But they're not required. It's not the ingredient that changes everything. It's the way you do it. Because if you become obsessed with ingredients, you fall into the exact mistake I'm trying to help you avoid: rush and anxiety. Chapter 2. Toasting. Where most people go wrong. Place the pan over medium heat, not high heat. High heat turns into anxiety. Wait a moment, just until it warms up. Now add the salt to the pan. No need to overdo it. A handful is enough to symbolize the seal. And now comes the most important moment. Stir slowly, very slowly. And while you stir, I want you to remember one thing. You are not cooking. You are training presence. And here is the step 2 mistake that cancels the process for many people. The person stirs with rush, with force, already thinking, I want results, I want results. And the body is so accelerated that the movement turns nervous. And a nervous gesture doesn't seal. A nervous gesture scatters. So here is the practical correction. Stir as if you're organizing something. As if you're putting each thing back in its place. If your hand is shaking from urgency, stop for 2 seconds. Breathe, then continue. Now, while you're stirring, this is not the moment for long phrases. This is not a speech. If you choose to say something, make it a short sentence, simple, grounded. The kind of sentence a woman uses when she's taking control again. You can say it softly or just inside yourself. With order I open, or I seal the leaks, or I sustain what comes in. 1 sentence only. No rush. Because here's the secret. When you talk too much, you start speaking from anxiety. And anxiety is noisy. Order is quiet. You'll notice the salt changing slightly. It becomes drier, warmer. Sometimes the texture shifts a bit. You don't need to wait for a visual miracle. The point is the process. Now I want to give you a small internal checkpoint because it helps your mind trust what you're doing. As you stir, notice if your jaw is clenched, if your shoulders are lifted, if your breathing is shallow. If so, you're doing it with rush. And you don't need to blame yourself, you just need to adjust. Slow the movement, that's it. That alone is already the seal. Chapter 3. The invisible detail. The right word at the right time. Now listen carefully, because this is the detail almost no one follows. Most people start repeating affirmations from the very first second. Then the mind speeds up. And when the mind speeds up, it talks to fill anxiety. The detail is this. First, you do the gesture with presence. Only after that do you add the word. So after a few minutes of stirring calmly, pause for 2 seconds. Look at the salt and say 1 single sentence, like a stamp. You can say, I open my paths with order, or provision stays, or I receive and I sustain. And that's it. You don't repeat it 20 times. Once, as a seal. This has a very strong psychological effect. You train your brain not to beg. You declare, and declaration changes posture. Posture changes decisions, and decisions change results. Now comes a very important part. You're not going to switch into, now I'll tell everyone, or now I'll test it. This is not a trick. This is your moment, and what is yours, you protect. Chapter 4. Water. Turning the seal into cleansing and closure. Now you'll use clean water, and I'll guide you in a safe, simple way. You can choose whichever option feels more comfortable for you. Option 1. Symbolic cleansing on the body. More traditional. Prepare a container with warm water. Let the toasted salt rest for a moment, then mix it into the water with respect. If you want, you can strain it so only the water remains. After your normal shower, pour this water from your neck down slowly. No drama, no need to prove anything. It's simply a gesture of closure and alignment. While you do this, repeat a short phrase mentally. With order, I open, or I sustain wealth. And that's it. Option 2. Symbolic cleansing of the entrance. Lighter and more practical. If you prefer not to use it on your body, you can use this water to wipe the entrance of your home, near the front door, in a simple way, like someone tidying up. Because the entrance symbolizes paths, and for people who feel like doors are closed, this speaks directly. You don't need to soak anything, just one intentional gesture. And while you do it, think, I open with order, I close the leaks. Now listen carefully. What matters is not which option you choose. What matters is your state. Presence, calm, respect. And here is the discipline that sustains the process. If you can, repeat it for 3 days, not as an obsession, but as a routine. It can be Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, or 3 consecutive days that make sense in your life. And if you can't do it 3 days in a row, that's okay. You can do it once a week for 3 weeks. The point is consistency, not compulsion, because compulsion is anxiety, and anxiety is leakage. Now I'm going to tell you what usually happens next, and I want you to hear this with maturity. Sometimes when you start putting things in order, the first sign isn't money. The first sign is clarity. You start noticing where you were leaking energy. You notice people who drain you. You notice small expenses you used to make without realizing it. You notice that your words had weight to them. That's opening. Because before wealth, there is space. And now I want to place a small commitment here. The right way without pressure. If you've made it this far, comment one short sentence to anchor the process. Just one sentence. Comment, I do this with order. That's strong. It's simple. And it's not excessive. It's a mature commitment. And stay with me, because now that you understand the method, I'm going to tell you 3 short stories, real in the human sense, that show how this order shows up differently in different lives. And pay attention. In the last story, there's a detail many people ignore, and it's directly connected to the secret. Not explaining, not joking about it, not trying to prove anything. Let's go to the stories. Now I'll tell you 3 short stories, not to promise anything magical, but to help you understand something important. When you put things in order, provision starts responding differently in each life. And notice this. Sometimes the first sign isn't money falling from the sky. Sometimes it's clarity, relief, a conversation that unlocks something, an opportunity that comes back. What changes first is the flow. The first story is about Helen. Helen was 59 years old and lived with a constant sense of instability. She worked, but it always felt like there was some urgency that swallowed everything. The phrase she said most often was, "Money just doesn't stay with me," and she said it with a mix of anger and resignation. When she started doing this practice with order, I asked her for something simple. For 7 days, every time the phrase, "money doesn't stay," came to her lips, she would replace it with a more precise one. "I'm learning how to sustain what comes in." At first it sounded silly, but do you know what happened? She stopped attacking herself with words. And when she stopped attacking herself, she started seeing the small leaks. Subscriptions she didn't even use, anxiety spending, late fees from disorganization. In 2 weeks, she didn't become rich, but she stopped bleeding. And that's the beginning of any wealth. The second story is about Martha. Martha was 53 years old and said her house felt heavy. She couldn't explain it, but she felt tired the moment she walked in, as if everything reminded her of worry. She also had a habit. She'd come home and drop her purse, keys, bills, everything here on the table without order. She'd say, "I'll deal with it later." And later became never. It all piled up. She did one simple thing for 3 days. Before going to bed, She organized the entryway, just 5 minutes. And alongside that, she did the salt gesture calmly, without rush. The first week, the sign was unexpected. She started sleeping better. And when she slept better, she woke up clearer. The second week, she resolved an issue she had been postponing for months. And in the third week, extra work showed up. Not by luck, but because she was more awake, more present, more solid in saying yes and no. Order calls in order. The third story is the kind many people don't tell, and it's the most important one, because it's tied directly to the secret, not sharing with just anyone, not doing it in a joking tone, not doing it to show off. The third story is about Sonia, 61 years old. She did the ritual with respect, but she made a common mistake. She told someone close to her in a half-joking way like, "Let's see if this works." The other person responded with irony, with mockery, with that cutting laugh. Right away, Sonia felt a tightness. She tried to ignore it, but the truth is, it affected her inner state. She started doubting. She started doing the practice with anxiety, and that's when the practice lost its strength, because the seal turned into noise. She did it again the right way, and she learned a lesson worth gold. There are things you do for your path, not for other people's opinions. I'm telling you this with respect, because I know what family environments are like. I know what criticism feels like. I know what it's like to try something and have someone shut you down. So keep this simple rule close. What is sacred to you, you protect. Now in a moment I'm going to move into a critical warning, the kind of thing that reverses the process when someone acts on impulse. And I'll show you how to avoid that with maturity, without fear, without paranoia, because the goal is order, not tension. And before I go into this part, I want you to observe yourself. Just by listening to these stories, have you already noticed where you leak? In your words, in your rush, in disorganization, in the need to explain yourself? Hold on to that, because that's exactly where the next part will protect you. Now comes the part I consider the most important, not because it gives you hope, but because it protects you. Many people do a beautiful gesture, start with intention, feel a slight improvement, and then it reverses. And when it reverses, they think, "See, nothing ever works for me." But most of the time, it's not that nothing works. It's that the person opened something inside themselves and didn't protect the process. So I'm going to give you 3 clear warnings. No fear, no superstition. This is emotional guidance and order. First warning, don't do this to prove anything. Don't do it to test the universe. Don't do it to see if it works. Don't do it to convince anyone. When you do things to prove something, you enter a state of hidden anxiety. And anxiety creates rush, and rush opens leaks. Do it like someone who seals, like someone who organizes, like someone who returns to their center. Second warning, don't turn this into compulsion. If you do it today, then again tomorrow, then again the next day, repeating it in desperation, you're telling yourself, "I don't trust." And what sustains wealth is not desperation, it's consistency. Abundance does not respond to panic, it responds to steady calm. So if you choose 3 days, do 3 days. If you choose once a week, do once a week. But don't do it like someone chasing after something out of breath. Third warning, protect your words and your silence. This is where many mature women stumble, and I'll say this with respect. We're used to justifying ourselves, explaining, sharing too much, looking for validation, but not everyone deserves to hear what you are building. If you do this process, don't share it with people who mock you. Don't share it with people who don't believe. Don't share it with people who minimize you. Not because they have power over you, but because their reaction affects your inner state. And your inner state is the foundation of the seal. You don't need an audience, you need order. Now I want you to understand something important. If after putting things in order, some things start to shift, people pulling away, an agreement falling apart, a truth coming to the surface, this is not punishment. This is reorganization. Sometimes what was blocking the flow was exactly what seemed normal. So instead of thinking, "I'm losing something," think, "I'm closing leaks." And here's one final care. When you feel the urge to talk too much, to explain too much, to ask for opinions, pause, breathe, and remember, what is sacred to me, I protect. Now let's move to closure, because no process becomes strong if it isn't closed the right way. And it's in the closing that you stabilize the open path with maturity and peace. We're going to close this properly now, because I told you from the beginning, order, seal, and closure. And closure is what creates stability. It prevents that feeling of, I started well, and then ended up back in the same place. So do this, simply. When you finish your 3rd days, or when you finish your practice in the way you chose, make one final closing gesture. Nothing exaggerated, nothing theatrical, a mature gesture. You can take what's left and return it to the earth respectfully, in a plant pot, in a garden, at the base of a plant. And while you do this, think or softly say, I return what I received, and I sustain what comes in. This gesture has a very deep meaning. You take the process out of anxiety and place it into trust. You close it. You don't leave it open. And now comes something I consider powerful precisely because it's simple. Make a small act of circulation, not out of obligation, not to buy anything, just as an inner sign of trust. It can be a small donation helping someone with something simple, setting aside a piece of clothing in good condition, or any act of generosity that doesn't strain you. The point is this. Healthy wealth circulates, it doesn't live trapped in fear. Now I'm going to tell you what to observe over the next few days. Pay close attention, because this increases your clarity a lot. Don't dismiss small signs. 5 signs within 7 days that often appear when you begin to put things in order. You feel a light sense of clarity where there used to be confusion. You start saying no with more firmness and less guilt. You notice small expenses and make decisions with more awareness. People and situations begin to show themselves for what they really are. A small opportunity appears, a conversation, an invitation, an idea that you would have ignored before. And notice this, I'm not promising money falling from the sky. I'm describing the beginning of flow, because money often arrives as a consequence of what you put in order. Now I want you to do something that helps this channel and also helps you stay connected to the process. Come back here in a few days and comment on what you noticed, even if it's something small. Sometimes it's I slept better. Sometimes it's I had a conversation that unlocked something. Sometimes it's I stopped spending out of anxiety. That's a sign. That's movement. And if this video spoke to you, I ask you one thing with respect. Subscribe now. Because this channel is new and I'm turning this into a layered series. And the next video is essential. I'm going to show you how to protect wealth so it doesn't slip away again, especially through the way you speak, the people you allow close to you, and the small habits that drain without you even noticing. And before you go, I want to leave you with a short sentence. A sentence mature women understand as posture, not fantasy. Wealth enters where there is order, and it stays where there is a seal. If you stayed until the end, you already did something many people don't. You chose presence over rush. Now close this video calmly, and remember, it's not luck, it's order, consistency, and the right timing. See you in the next one.